Hi, everybody. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're in YouTube and you'd like to actually ask questions, be part of the conversation, what you have to do is you have to travel through the Zoom link that you'll see down below. Once in Zoom, travel through the Mukana link, and you'll end up in Mukana, and that's where you can ask questions. You can vote questions up and down and be part of the conversation. If you'd like to be part of the panel itself, then sorry, and that what you want to do is actually get here early. You can see that I probably should have gotten here a little earlier. So hold on one second. You want to get here earlier. Sorry, it was a hard start. Got something in my throat. Yeah, so you want to, sorry for the hard start, everybody. You want to get here before 6:40 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can get here as early as 6. In fact, if you watch the emails that we send out, you can actually there's another place that you can go as early as 5. In fact, the 5 o'clock segment now has a whole different discussion. Like it started with a couple people hanging out, and now we're like planning shoots, in the 5 o'clock hour. So you don't have to come. I'm just saying that there is another thing out there that's become its own little beast. So anyway, so that's the 5 a.m. and then 6 a.m. is the pre-show, and then 6:40 is when we do mic checks. At 7 o'clock, we start doing general discussion. And today we're going to do general discussion for 2 hours. But generally the first hour is something that's general discussion. And then the second hour is something specific. And we've got a great week lined up this week. We're going to talk about filters tomorrow, like audio processing. So we'll talk about that. And then Jeffrey Powers is going to lead a conversation about Stream Deck, but a lot of us are using Stream Deck, so a lot of us will be part of that. We'll talk about hosting on Thursday and color with Ray Maxwell on Friday. And then we've got the South by Southwest education team in on Saturday. So it's a busy week. Also, I haven't put it in the email yet, but we will start something new next week. There will be a Monday evening session. So this has been something that a lot of people have been pushing for a little while, and pushing for, especially our Australian friends. So we're going to basically, we'll do it in the evening. I was going to do it at 7, but I might do it at 6. There was some pushback on 7 for the East Coasters who want to be part of it. So I think we might start it as early as 6 o'clock in the evening on Mondays, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how many people show up. We'll see how many and how the conversation goes. But so anyway, so Monday evening next week will be the first one that we go down that path. All right, Bill, let's go ahead and get it started.
Okay, we're going to start with a Jeff Francis question. Whoops, Stuart is waving his hand.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. We're going to start with a Jeff Francis question. And he prefaces this with a bit of a philosophical reflective question. When you've completed an event with nearly flawless execution, let's say you imagine you've hit 99.9% good, are you still haunted by the tiny errors that inevitably occurred, late camera switches, early slide deck changes, those little things? Discuss.
Go ahead, Jason.
If I would say so, first and foremost, there's no such thing as perfect production. It just straight away, like, it does not exist. You're only as good as your last production. And to that end, what matters most is that you are besting yourself and impressing your client. And to answer the direct question, it should, if you want to keep getting better.
Go ahead, Sky.
Art is never finished, and again, it's in the imperfections that actually are the organic goodness, because it makes it unique versus replicatable. And the end goal is the audience entertained? Is the audience, is your message?
Yep, Bill.
Yeah, I think we all train ourselves, if we in this for a long time and have some success in it, to look for the flaws, to look for the things that we can improve upon. That means we're constantly not looking at the 99% that we did right. We're focused on the 1% that we want to improve on the next time. I will say I have looked back at things, and my focus was on a glitch that I saw, that I identified, that I wanted to deal with. When I've watched it back the next time, I have said to myself, yeah, that really wasn't bad at all. Why was I so hard on myself for that? But I think being hard on yourself is one of the things that lets you improve and you get better.
Yeah, Stuart?
Yes, stressed about things during the show, after the show, right up until the time where you put the key in the car and turn the engine on to drive home, because you have to eventually put it away and concentrate on the next show coming up for starters. And that happens the moment you walk out of that gig.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think the important thing is to know to stress on things enough to know what caused it. You need to discuss it. You need to circle around it. You need to kind of examine it from every angle so that you can avoid it happening again. Obviously, the professional is the one who doesn't make the same mistake again. And Jason, I loved what you said. You said something, I can't remember now. It was you something for yourself. Anyway, the main thing is to obsess over it enough to avoid the repeat mistake.
I mean, I think that one of the, I was watching a little bit of the Chiefs game yesterday, and they talked about the Chiefs being obsessed with trying to build the complete game, you know, the perfect game, and they said we haven't figured it out yet. They are going to the Super Bowl, like so they, you know, but they're trying to solve an insolvable problem, you know, and I know that for me, in a successful event, I'll have a list of probably 75 to 100 things I didn't like about the production, about the outcome, about the parts, about the post, about something. You know, I'm usually pretty upset about all of it. I pretty much hate everything I've done about 10 minutes after I finished it. Not like I'm okay with it. I'm like, I just hate it. Like, I don't want to see it again. You know, like, and so, you know, and so that's kind of how I am about it. I'm okay with that. It's it's a personality issue. I can't, it's been that way for me since I was 10. So it's not like as soon as I'm done with something, I'm frustrated and angry. And like, I just wish that I could do a bunch of other things. But what I do typically is I write those things down. People who work with me know that I want to do postmortems really fast, you know, like usually within a week, sometimes within a day. Sometimes I like doing them during the event, just so we can capture everything that went wrong. Like, I am obsessed with capturing what went wrong in the pre-production, in the production, in the post-production, in the execution. I don't really care about, I mean, I kind of like, we'll look at what went right, but what I really want is not to make the same mistake again. And so, you know, it's really just a matter of new mistakes. And so let's make sure we don't make these ones again and figure out the way to manage that. And so, you know, that's kind of the approach that I have for almost all of my projects. I don't necessarily share all 75 with the client of things that I'm not happy. I send them a truncated, a redacted list of the things that could be done better. But it's never, I mean, you want to keep on what I call failing forward. You know, so I call it failing forward, which is that you should feel always like you're failing. And then when you look back, you see how far you've gone. But in the midst of it, you know, if you're pushing the outer envelope of it, even if it looks good from the outside, most clients on my side will see very little of what went wrong. If I do, you know, they'll see maybe a couple little things that we can make better. But the goal is that you're finding more things than they are. When you won't keep a client very long if they find more things than you do. So anyway, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, whenever I do something like that, I always start thinking of the backups of the backups. It's like, okay, if that one went well, what could go wrong in the future? What has gone wrong in the past? And I think you learn a lot more from those failures or on other people's. And that's why I applaud Doug for coming on here and sharing some of his issues that he's had. You know, sometimes it's running two wires. Like anytime I run an Ethernet cable, I'll run two. Why? Because past experience tells me that you're going to need another one for maybe another camera or that one fails. But yeah, it's all in having that backup, because then when the S hits the fan, sorry, Cleat you have a backup and the show goes on and it's smooth and the client's pleased. So it's nice to give yourself a pat on the back every once in a while, but be careful of too much of that.
I tend to think of myself as responsible for everything that went wrong. You know, like there was a general that put something up that I really identified with, which is that, you know, when something goes wrong, you know, I didn't provide the training, I didn't provide the resources, I didn't provide the right guidance, you know, the right information, you know, for the team to do what they need to do. I do that even with the participants, you know, and with everybody else. I don't expect anything of them. I expect it all of me. When they don't do what I expect, or when things don't work, I look at what conversation did I not have? What piece of infrastructure did I not create that had that happen? You know, and that's the, you know, and it happens every show. I mean, you miss things, you know, but I can't control what they did. I can control what I do, you know, and so I'm just constantly trying to focus on how to improve the way I approach those, which is very imperfect. It's an imperfect situation, and I'm imperfect in putting it together, but you just keep on wanting to use it as an opportunity to improve your art. So anyway, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I go as far as to, like, when we're doing a big production in my trailer, I put a GoPro behind and I record what happens. And then I've been adding the ability to record our comms as well. And what I do, I actually sync it up and with the program in the back channel, and then I watch it, and then we take notes, and we find out what we did right and what we did wrong, and that's the only way we learn. I'm very critical of myself, and
I try to keep some of those notes, and I talked about it over the weekend, I think, but in real time, where I write things down that aren't working because I'll forget them. I just forget in the heat of the moment, you'll forget them, and I don't try to find a solution. I'll just say this didn't work, and just like a note, it's like I'm putting a pin in the wall, like that didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. I was doing that on Saturday. There was a lot of things that didn't work on Saturday. From the client's perspective, it was fine. On the back end, I almost lost my hand hitting a button to try to keep things going. So anyway, so you're constantly trying to write those things out, because you'll forget them. That's the thing, is you'll forget 90% of what went wrong by the end of the event. That's the problem. Go ahead, Jeff.
I asked this question because I think it's a great discussion and to hear. And I know that in dealing with the students I get, they don't have this perspective yet of the detail oriented that it takes to build a career, that you have to be constantly focused on those details and failing forward and chipping away at the edges of everything that can go wrong. And you just get 90%, 95%, 97%, 99, 99.9 by chipping away and being really careful about all those details. And so to hear everyone in this panel, be so focused on those details is how these people have these careers that they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill?
Yeah, I wanted to bring up one other little thing, and that is the idea of feedback loops. I once read a book about fuzzy logic, which was a discipline for a while that people were using. And it's the kind of thing that allows you to take a bullet train that's going really fast and smoothly stop it when it's coming into a station. And there has to be that feedback loop of where are we now, where do we need to get to, and how do I adjust the amount of stopping pressure or whatever it is so that the people who are writing on it have a smooth experience. Everything we're talking about here is setting up feedback loops so that you start to constantly analyze your performance against a set of metrics and learn how fast or how lightly you have to press things to get the kind of results that you want and hit your targets. It was interesting.
And I think part of it is also creating a culture of being ruthless. And we call it ruthless reviews here. We do mic checks, but you want to build a culture that it's okay for things not to be perfect. So the first thing that has to happen is it's okay for it not to be perfect. It's okay for, you're not going to throw a tantrum because something isn't perfect. It is that we all are expanding and growing and figuring it out. So from a manager or perspective, you have to get to a point where you create an environment that picking at things is, you look at Pixar. One of the reasons Pixar films are so amazing is because they go through these every scene just goes through these grueling review sessions where people just throw things at it and, push it, and their willingness to put it up against that and then push against it and have everybody's input and then take what they're going to take and move forward. I think a lot of people, when they get thin-skinned, if you're thin-skinned, it gets very hard for you to progress, so, you have to get thick-skinned knowing that it's not going to work and working hard to keep on closing the gap. I used to have on one of my offices, I had a sign that I bought in London that said mind the gap. But for me, what that meant was minding the gap between where I am and where perfection is, just mind that gap, and just constantly be trying to close it. Anyway, next question.
James in Dublin, I don't know whether it's Dublin or Dublin, Ohio. It doesn't really matter. With office hours, pre-show, show, after show, and Discord, not to mention the test kitchen and other things. We're talking about evening shows. Any tips for handling information overload? So much good information. And note, it's so easy to get distracted and lose focus while dealing with FOMO, fear.
Jason, and then Stuart.
Well, as a highly ADD individual, I can tell you information overload is not only like kind of a stock and trade for me, but is something that I end up enjoying. That said, I would say hyper attention to what you're actually looking for. The reason we give you everything is not so that you need to read it top to bottom, left to right, because you're not going to retain it. Use it as reference. You don't read the dictionary A to Z. What you do is you look stuff up as needed and use it for reference. The purpose here is, you know, standing reference, historical and real time, as well as, you know, a question and feedback loop that, you know, that can inform your opinions, you know, based on today.
Right. Stuart.
An aside before I make my point is we figured out my brother was reading the dictionary at about G, maybe F, and it kind of helped him more than local school did. But one thing that is important with dealing with information overload is take the time to log off every so often. Go and do something that clears your brain, that is a completely unrelated activity to what you're doing. It might be as simple as go and mow the lawn, or go and ride a bike, or just something other than what you're doing. Clear the head, come back fresh, and you will see new insights to things that might have been vexing you before.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I absolutely believe in what Stuart's saying, that taking time off and clearing your registers is a really good thing. As to the fear of missing out thing, I think that is huge now. And I agree with James that I see a lot of people, particularly I saw this in young people who are coming into shooting and working on sets and things like that. And they were concerned with, I want to go do this, but I would see them spend 3 years trying to pick a camera. You know, am I going to miss out? Am I not going to get the features? Do I have to wait until the next one comes out because I won't have this feature or that feature? And the result that I saw was that they never shot. So they never got better at being a camera operator because they were always worried about missing out on something with the next great tool. And the people who just said, I can only afford this one, which isn't as good probably as that one, but I'm going to go out and use it. They became the hot camera people because they got the tool and they used it, even if it wasn't perfect.
When it comes to the content, you know, behind what we're doing, I think that part of the goal is that we are providing every day. If you have something you're trying to fix, the goal for us is to provide what I call a nutrient-rich environment, which is that there's a lot of places for you to gain information. If you have the time, you can let it wash over you. If you don't have the time, you always have a place to ask, whether it's Discord or whether it's here. There are definitely lots of opportunities for you to do stuff. But I think that, you know, what I would probably do in the background when you can't make it is just have this playing. We're working on getting into a podcast. I was too busy, but this month I have a more reasonable schedule. So we'll have a podcast by the end of February going. And so you'll just be able to listen to it. You can listen to it from YouTube right now. I guess Paul suggested, and I'm doing the research on how to do it, to put it in Clubhouse so you can listen to it there too. Anyway, but the goal is to really, when you can, is to have that stuff going on in the background and check things. But it's kind of like an all you can eat buffet. First time, you know, if you've come in, there isn't a lot of good information out there to do what we do. And so I know that it's like coming in to this is like going to an all you can eat buffet, and suddenly there's just tons and tons of content and you just want to eat everything. And eventually you're going to realize that you're going to gain a lot of weight. So I think that you'll have to, you know, knowing that my goal has been to know that it's consistent, that there's something happening every day. There's a consistent there. When you need to know something, the goal is that we all can, there's answers that are readily available or readily available in certain pipelines. And we're going to keep on trying to expand what those are. But the goal is that you eventually don't feel like you have to eat all of it. So you can eat what you need. As a group, because we've built this community, the advantage is that all of us, you know, are picking up different things and having different days that we're here and different things that we focus on, so that when you need that answer, more people have been studying it together, you know, and you can get it faster, you know, and it's just something that we all have to, you know, if we can continue to do what we're doing, it gets pretty interesting. So anyway, next question.
Sound Mixer SF, Jesse, who's here on the panel from San Francisco Bay Area. Is there any way to run an NVIDIA eGPU on a Mac Pro late 2013?
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, there absolutely is. I personally like, for the Thunderbolt 2, I'd say the Akitio Thunder 2 is probably going to be your best enclosure. If you're going above 10.12, then you're going to run into some serious limitations with the NVIDIA line, simply because that's when Apple and NVIDIA parted ways. egpu.io is your very best friend. Read 10 times more than you write, and you will not annoy anyone in the forums. And that's going to be the right way to do this. And I think it's a great upgrade.
Have you tried Purge Wrangler?
I don't know what Purge Wrangler is.
All right. Thanks very much, Jason.
Yep. Stuart.
Jesse, I've got one other option for you, and that is to make some money on it, sell it to one of the Scion owners as a potential computer to record RAW on from the Kona 4 cards, because that's the era of Mac Pros that we go looking for.
Copy.
Next question.
Moving on, Doug Johnson of Orem, Utah says, I tried the Zoom Facebook portal up-res trick again this weekend and it didn't work. Is it only me or has it stopped working for others as well?
All right, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I got a couple DMs yesterday about this, and so I tested it. And mine worked fine, so I'm wondering if we should test a couple other people's and see if it's still working or if they close that back door down.
Good, Jeffrey.
Two factors to remember. First of all, you got to have the video at full screen. Otherwise, it won't go to 720p in your statistics. And second of all, if the camera you're using to bring it in is not 720p, then you're not going to get to 720p. And there is also internet connection issues that will bring it down less than
And I believe if no one's requesting it at 720p, it may not go to 720p either. So if you just jump on, you may or may not see it, publish at that
But
rate. Doesn't
the portal itself ask for 720p? And isn't that, if you join, I think that was what used to knock it up. Am I, Guy?
When you create the meeting, there is also a setting, at least for the 1080 crowd, that says add everyone in and down, actually give them the full resolution. I do not remember exactly where it is, but that's the way to enforce it.
There's a web preference in the advanced that says make them HD. And if you don't do that, it won't happen. So you can make sure that that's selected as well. Next question.
Stuart, a fair weather from here on the panel, Melbourne. Anyone had any experience with the Z-Cam EVF electronic viewfinder? I'm going to be shopping to replace my small rig DP4 and an EVF that is reported to be as being able to do Wi-Fi streaming and has a certain less gear as more performance appeal. And he has a link there to the Z-Cam unit he's talking about.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I should point out that that's a small HD DP4 behind me, not a small rig DP4. I only found out about this EVF today, and it's like it's got Wi-Fi. It does HDMI in and loop through to both HDMI and SDI. Loop through to SDI out. It looks like you can load LUTs on it and what have you, but it also looks like it's sold out here in Australia. But the being able to stream both to an app and to a PC looks pretty useful, especially for like removing gear off the camera and having one device that does two tasks.
Jason?
My only advice on this just has to do with a long conversation with the CEO and the CTO over the course of several CESs. I can say without question, their technology is always very exciting, and their early first advanced, the first time they do something, their first gen sometimes has some strange bugs. For example, they gave me one of these early, 4K Z-cams, and it was amazing. It did everything that they said, and then it overheated. Little stuff like that. So, barring that, they may very well several years later have fixed that kind of issue. But yeah, I think it's absolutely worth a shot, and they'll definitely take it back if you don't like it.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, just on the Z-Cam E1, yes, they are well known in the enthusiast rocketry market for overheating. Just ask Tim Dodds, the everyday astronaut. They've literally crashed out his stream several times. But they did get it fixed, and yeah, from what I've seen, the image quality looks pretty damn good. I would like to see what the image quality is like out of the viewfinder.
Their hardware is second to none. They really do not skimp on hardware. Their trick is that they write all their own software. So if there are going to be bugs, that's where it's going to be.
Next question.
Tim McCulloch of Kansas City, Kansas, here in the U.S. We have 30-second dead air pause at the top of the show. What is its purpose?
it's an inefficient way for me to do it, and I just haven't had the time to re-gear it. So and we should be clipping it off. It's just that if I clip it off, it means that Jeffrey has to like reset all the endpoints for the times, and so I haven't gone through to do that to Jeffrey yet. So what will eventually happen is that we're going to kind of feed a stream into YouTube that is derived from Zoom, not directly from Zoom, probably by the end of February. I mean, maybe even earlier. I've just been trying to figure that out. So the dead air that you see is that I have to start it, wait for it to start, and it starts streaming before I get to see that it started. Then I have to make sure that it's muted so I don't hear myself twice. Then I have to share and embed and then put it into Makana. And on my current screens, it doesn't scale correctly. Anyway, so there's a bunch of things that are problematic with it. Anyway, so it's just I've gotten it down about as fast as I can go, and it's not sufficient. So what we're going to get to sooner than later is there's two things. One is we are going to first get a stream going so that you see something until we go live. Like once we're live, you'll be a countdown clock or something, and it's all live, and the mic checks are not part of it. They're just something else there. And then we cut to it with an audio follows video, and then we're done. The second thing is that I'm testing Softron's, I think play out. I can't think of the name of it, play live or whatever. Anyway, where I'm going with it is I think I'm going to try, we'll test it. I don't know how long I'll last, but we'll see. I have an idea of letting replays of the older events run 24/7. Just for the person who was worried about FOMO, is take the last, basically the last month of it running in order 24/7. So you can just turn it on and just let it play in the background, but it'll have the way the thing works is it'll have an open window, so we can just punch into it with the show. So the live show will fit into that and then drop back out, in the live stream. But so there'll still be a live event that is the live event. You can just go to that, but there'll be a 24/7. And if you happen to be watching the 24/7, it'll just cut straight to it. So, and then we'll have little things like interstitials in between them that tells you what's happening this week, and, start turning into a real station. Anyway, so that's kind of what I'm working on right now. And hopefully I've been a little behind because of my last project, but things should be a little relaxed for a couple of weeks. So you should see a bunch of changes because I have a little bit of headspace for a minute. So anyway, that's what we're working on. Anyway, but that's why there's a long gap. Next question.
Dan Huber in Erie, Pennsylvania says, office hours panelists have a lot of equipment for their setups. Do you use any power conditioners or universal power supplies?
Hey, go ahead, Jason.
Yes, by the truckload. The answer is by the truckload. And what matters most, just for a quick rundown, is that you want enough power, but stuff like your monitor's flickering for a second, not the end of the world. What you really want to power, what you really want to protect against is whatever you're doing requiring a reboot. So I would say computers, well, first networking equipment, computers, of course, cameras and what have you. And then, after that, I would say monitors. Little known fact, monitors require more power than just about all other things that a computer does.
I admit my current office doesn't, but almost every office almost everything we do that has production has a lot of them. Our kind of go-to average one is the APC 1500 volt amp. That's just kind of what I get for everything because it's just easier to deal with, and it's got batteries that you can pull out. Bill and then Stuart.
I do not use anything, and I would like to publicly go on record as thanking San Diego Gas and Electric for consistently providing power. I don't think it's gone down in about 3 or 4 years. So let's hear it for the municipal workers who do our infrastructure and sometimes get it right enough.
Because California never has problems with power.
Let's get back to just UPSs. Stuart and then Jeffrey.
I'm actually not using a UPS at the moment, but both my internet connection and the computer I'm on have battery backup of their own, one being a laptop, one being a NBN fiber point with battery backup. But the thing is, and I'm literally reaching between my knees, these things are cheap and you can buy them everywhere, and you should replace your UPS battery on a regular basis. If it's if you think it's wearing out or it's at the end of life, go and get a new one. They're cheap. They're worth getting. And don't forget that the inrush current, when you switch a lot of gear on, is higher than the static current of when the gear is operating. So you will need to accommodate the size of your UPS to handle that
Generally,
for when you're restarting.
Generally, my UPSs, I'll get more UPSs if the load is any higher than about 55%. You know, like that's how I kind of run my UPSs so that they have lots of headroom. That way, if things suddenly take more than I expected, I don't start running out. So 55% is usually my high watermark on my UPSs, and then I'll start getting more if I see that number. Jeffrey, the guy, then Paul, and we'll move on.
Yeah, my UPS is basically just down by where the modem and the router are. So if I get just a simple pop of the power, I at least don't lose internet off of that. And I do have one machine hooked up to it. As for power conditioning, I go with Furman because being a musician, that's what we used a lot. One thing about power conditioners is if you do go through a power surge, you replace those power conditioners. If those power conditioners are over 10 years old, you replace those power conditioners because they're not going to work as well as they did on day one.
Go ahead, Guy, and then Paul. Then we'll move on.
Yeah, I would say I have 3 of them here, and the power went out last week, and the 2 on the network did not last very long because I installed a new huge switch, and it sucked down the power pretty quick. So all these displays were still up and going for about 45 minutes. So it's important to check the load whenever you add things because, and check those batteries like Stuart was saying, because eventually they do start to deplete and not take up as good of a charge. And so 2 years, I think was what Mickey was saying when he replaces the critical ones in 3 years and kind of hands them down to the lower tier stuff. But yeah, I was shocked that I only got 45 minutes out of this huge one. That's like, I'll put a link in the chat. It was about a $650 full on server rack one. It shows the load and everything. And yeah, it said 45 minutes left. So I just shut everything down and I had no internet anyways. Well, except for a hotspot, but that was no fun.
Yeah. I usually am only hoping for about 15 to 20 minutes of time. Usually if something's mission critical, I've got a generator somewhere. In fact, even for my house, because I live in Northern California, we can't, unlike Bill, we have no confidence in our power company. You know, it's worthless. So you don't know when you're going to turn off your power randomly. And so for days, not that I'm bitter. And so so we're putting in a natural gas generator for the house. And the only thing I need the UPSs for is to switch from the I have solar as well, but it's not enough to drive it. It's a little older. And so generators are also useful. The best little generator is the Honda 2000. It's quiet, produces a lot of power, enough power to run small trucks.
I
Paul?
have the Amazon Basics, and it's a pretty good unit. That's it there. I don't know how well you can see it.
Does it have a removable battery?
Yeah, it does. I believe it does. I hope I'm not making this up, but I think it has a removable battery. I'll check and get back to you.
Yep.
It's the same one I have, and it does.
Okay. Go next question.
Moving on to Manolo Lozano. I'm new to Discord. Could you tell me a few examples of how it's used and how it's different from any other platforms? Any specific advantages to the Office Hours Discord?
Go ahead, Jason.
It is searchable, it's real time, it's scalable, and here's a big one, it's free.
Yeah, so I used Slack for years. So I ran the company on Slack for a long time. And so it's very Slack-like, but a lot more fluid. So I would say it's not as secure as Slack. And so it's easy to, get, it's a little easier to get into. It's user-based, but it's not quite as easy. It's not quite as secure as Slack, but it's very Slack-like. You can build channels, you can build private channels. You have a lot of control over what permissions you give people. So you can give people classes of information. And Stuart, I'd rather not cut to that. If you can take that out because we're on a live stream. What it lets you do is have a bunch of conversations that are, that are public, that are grouped, that are categorized, but also that are private. You can have point-to-point communications, and you can have some video and audio as well. It has the capability of doing both video chats and audio chats. I will say that for most people, it's in our Discord, it's turned off. And this is mostly a liability issue from my perspective of, Discord in print lets us kind of make sure that things aren't going sideways. So in audio or video, it would be slightly different. And I'm just not willing to take that on just yet. So that may change somewhere in the future, but not yet. So it does it has a lot of capabilities. And as Jason said, it's free. And I researched everything at the very beginning. And then I also let an independent group research it to decide what we came up with. And we basically all came up with Discord. So it's what the kids could use now. You know, it's well tested, now worth, I think, like $1 billion. So anyway, next question.
Ryan Jordan of Columbus, Ohio. With anyone have a favorite lower cost NDI HX compatible Ethernet router?
Stuart, how do you feel about HX?
Does everybody remember when Elon Musk was promoting the Boring Company and he built the not a flamethrower?
Right.
That's what I would use dealing with HX. Okay.
Jeffrey.
Okay. I wouldn't think about getting a router as much as I'd think about getting a switch, a 1 gig switch, PoE if you can, because some of these NDI devices run on power over Ethernet, and then just get a cheap router, because all the router is going to do is give you addresses, and if you've put static addresses, if you've marked down this camera goes to this IP, then it's just going to need 1 second to go over there, and that's it. The only time it will need to do that. So a good switch is the better thing than a router.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, to answer the question directly, I really like the Ubiquiti switches. 24 gigabit ports for, I don't know, $200, something like that. Now, of course, that's not going to be PoE, but you know, it is very customizable. It's VLAN aware, but you stay away from VLAN unless you really know what you're doing. You do not want to be running all of that through a router, even if it can do it, just because you don't. It should be able to run entirely on its own.
Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I use NDI every day, and I use an Ubiquiti network. And so my home office, when my production truck is plugged in, I have one gateway for the home and that. And then when I take my truck on the road, I have another gateway in that. So
are you using NDI HX or NDI?
Both.
Okay.
So inside the truck, it's full NDI, but I do have several Spark boxes that are the HX version. And they are kind of squirrely, I will admit, and I will say, Stuart, you are on task, even though you have a stronger opinion about them. I mean, I have to use them, and you know, at some point I will get further down the road, but I don't put anything critical on those cameras. You know, like it'll be a beauty shot camera. It won't be the main cameras. All that stuff is going on fiber, but yeah, I use NDI every day. But Ubiquiti is simple enough and deep enough, like Jason says, that if you want to tinker, you can. But if you just want to plug it in and it works, it does that too.
Next question.
Gavin Grafton of Manchester, UK says, anyone know of an Android or possibly iOS app that will allow a UVC, Universal Video Class webcam input, a Magewell SDI dongle or so forth, to have access to WebRTC or SRT sends? We have a few apps that will do RTMP, but that's about it. The closest is the Larix Broadcaster, but it crashes when UVC is enabled.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
There are a few dongles out there that will at least do the hardware side of it. As long as it is like basically webcam compliant, it should work. That said, I can't give you a specific answer. I have fished around and managed to get it to work. I would not do it for production. That said, you know, Paul may disagree with me. In fact, many people may disagree with me. I tend to err on the side of hardware, not, you know, be all end all type, you know, $5 dongle that can mess with stuff.
There are a variety of Android simulators that will simulate an Android on a box that has HDMI in, HDMI out, HDMI for the camera, HDMI out for the monitor, and it's just a little box. You can see them on Alibaba. we've had them with limited success. You know, we played with them for basically streaming into things like Instagram and TikTok. So you may want to research those things rather than, you know, that type, you know, that may be something that you could use that would give you that, but otherwise I don't know of any other solutions. Next question. Oh, go ahead, Stuart. Then we'll go on to the next question.
I'm actually sitting in front of the wrong computer to give a proper answer to this, but I was actually looking for devices literally earlier today for something that would accept a HDMI through USB input to an Android device. So if you search HDMI or Android HDMI USB, you'll actually get responses from the Play Store with software that will do this. So maybe that helps.
Mm-hmm. Next question.
Next question was about the mics checks we did earlier this morning. Stephen Kimbrough at Berkeley says, after Paul Wallace's issue with sync, and for those of you who weren't watching, he was a substantial amount video and audio out of sync when we did our first mic check. Can we discuss the chain and how that happens and how it was fixed in the end?
I didn't see it.
Yeah, Paul was pretty far off, but I don't know if we rechecked you, Paul. Are you still off as far? Unmute.
We don't know.
Yeah, you caught me off guard. You caught me off guard.
Yeah, you're still way off.
You tell me, how do I sound? Am I choppy? Am I good?
You're like a second off, maybe.
You sound fine,
check.
but big delay.
I mean,
Not as bad as last time.
What I did was I had a huge browser session with like 50 tabs, and I shut it down, and it I think it worked better by doing that.
Did you restart?
Yeah, and I restarted. Yeah.
You're still pretty far off. What processor are you using?
This is a P5. It's a Toughbook P5 processor. It's not the most gutsy.
Is it what
machine.
you've always used?
Yeah, I always use this. Except when I'm at my condo, then I've got a big, powerful tower that's loaded. You know, and then
I think we see you in your
problems.
condo. I think we see you in your condo more often.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why it's probably just it's probably just not enough processor power to do this.
I'm building a setup here.
That's good.
I'm just
saying this computer just isn't keeping up. So that the sync in this case is that the processor can't process the video audio is easy to process. Video is hard to process. And so if the processor isn't fast enough, there's places that you lose sync. One is every time it goes through some device, it's going to lose video is going to lose somewhere between a quarter frame and a frame and a half, depending on what you're putting it through. And so if you put it through a bunch of devices, you start adding up that delay, and then you have to use a delay unit to kind of slow down the audio. So it's an audio delay unit that you can use for that. But if the processor of the computer isn't fast enough, then what happens is it just can't serve up the frames fast enough, as fast as it can the audio. And so the video falls way behind the audio. And Paul's a good example of when that happens right now.
I'm going to build a tower out here so I can use that like I have that at the condo.
Yeah, you're probably about almost a second behind right now. But yeah, once you have the tower, it should be fine. Next question.
Brian Stockton of Des Moines, Iowa. I'm looking for a budget-friendly 10-inch monitor for my teleprompter that offers HDMI and SDI connections. I'm currently leaning towards a Lilliput A11. Are there any other specific suggestions?
I have used a lot of Lilliputs. I was just using one over the weekend. So they're for cost effectiveness, and they're pretty good. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I just ordered this for a very custom kit that involves putting an LCD in the lid of a Pelican case. We'll put the link in the Office Hours Discord. But NewSoul, NEWSOUL, has a 1920 by 1080 IPS HDR compatible monitor that'll take USB-C. Let's see, mini display port and HDMI.
How much is it?
Sorry, what?
How much?
Oh, $179, and right now there's a coupon for $30 off.
And the other one that I've seen people use that I haven't used yet are the Feel World. Feel World has some 10-inch ones that I think people seem to like. Stuart and then Jeff.
I wasn't going to mention the Feel World, but if you have a close look at them, the Feel World and the Lilliputs, things like the buttons are in the same place and the plugs are in the same place and the screws on the back of them are in the same place. See if you get where I'm hinting.
Yep, I go, Jeff.
I'm going to second the Lilliput. Thing I like about it is it does tell you the frame rate when you plug signals in, which is a nice confirmation.
Yep, absolutely.
And a great thing for troubleshooting.
And I think the ones that we have do the horizontal vertical flips for teleprompters and everything else are all built into the monitor. If you're going to monitor, you definitely want to have that, make sure that that feature exists in the monitor to flip horizontal in video. Otherwise, you have to have some external device to do that. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And I use one of those for my teleprompter, but I have to say that if you do that, you should spend some time working on using the menus when you're in teleprompter mode, because there's nothing worse than having, oh, I got to get into a different mode. And then everything you do brings up a menu that's entirely flipped backwards for teleprompting. And it can drive you crazy. In fact, with all equipment, I used to practice with cameras and things like that. I'd put myself in a dark room and see if I could learn to find the controls by touch. And that saved my life so many times in a darkened ballroom where I had to make a change to the camera state and couldn't see anything.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Ryan Jordan of Columbus, Ohio says, when streaming a church band from OBS to YouTube, I have clipping when the bass drum hits are heard on the stream, but OBS and the soundboard show no clipping. Any suggestions as to how to identify and rectify the issue?
I'm waiting for Jeff to jump in, but he hasn't raised his hand yet.
I'm guessing that that it's the compression that's clipping here, because you're not seeing the clipping.
It's also momentary. The levels may not be fast enough to pick it up as well.
Yeah, he doesn't see clipping on the board in OBS, but is he hearing clipping is part of the thing, because it depends on the ballistics of the meter whether you will see that. You probably are shooting for too high of a level, and you need some limiting in that chain.
Yep. Jeffrey, then Bill, then Jason.
Yeah, I'm kind of also wondering how he's getting it into OBS from there, if it's going from the board feed to OBS as opposed to its own individual auxiliary channel with its own dials and faders and stuff like that. That might be a issue right there as well. So how are you bringing it in? That's the question.
Jason, Bill, and then Jason.
Yeah, fast, strong transients. I tend not to trust my eyes on meters, because sometimes the pulse of energy is so quick that the drawing of it will not happen. That's the case where you have to trust your ears. If it sounds like it's clipping, it's clipping.
Jason.
I will mention that there are meters, of course, that can fix and show this because they have a history going back. They kind of look like a lie detector, and that'll show you whether or not, no matter how fast or slow you have it, you can zoom in. That said, if you don't have, per channel compression on the board, you could always use something like an inline shark, to modulate. If it's just the bass kick, modulate that down, and maybe that'll work.
Next question.
Moving to Jeff Francis of Columbia, South Carolina. Blackmagic Design HDMI to SDI Microconverter is the topic. What is different or better with the new 3G version?
Go ahead, Jason.
The new 3G version will allow you to take an SDI switcher and have camera control, and then transmit that camera control through to one of the more modern,
and it works
6K
both ways,
and 4K
right?
cameras.
So if you had an HD, if
yes,
you have a
absolutely.
mini can control the SDI, SDI can control the mini. So it allows the switchers to interact with all the cameras. It's the one ring to bring them all together. So I think that's the main difference. They're not that expensive, are they? I mean,
it's the same price. So everything that the prior bidirectionals had, plus camera control. It's important to know, though, that you have to set your camera right, because the box is identifying it to the tally. If you don't do that, you're going to be all camera one.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
JJ McKenna is back from Santa Venetia, Lower Scabo. We talked about that. I didn't realize that's in Marin County near you, Alex. So last week you guys answered the issue that occurs with aging ears by proffering the use of scopes to see noise. What are reliable software scopes to listen for people to use on multiple platforms that are sensitive enough to see things like fan noise?
It depends on Mac or PC, I think. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, and just one thing, often scopes have scale adjustment. So if you have a relatively low noise floor, if it's just a small fan in the background, you're still hearing it, but it's way below the peaks of what you're doing. Increasing the scale can let you see that little band of kind of rash at the bottom, which is what often broadband noise looks like, and how much of that is in the signal compared to the signal is your signal to noise ratio.
Yeah, there is, and I'm trying to find it really quickly here, but I mean, the one that I like the most is still Scopebox, but you have to have owned it before. It's available by Synaptech. They bought the code, but it hasn't been updated.
Don't you mean
yet.
Spectre, not Scopebox?
You're right. I mean Spectre. So Spectre, not Scopebox. It's a Spectre from, and now it's from Synaptech. You might be able to download a demo, but you can't get the final version unless you owned it before. They're still working, I think, on the port. But that is, and then the other one I think is made by, I believe, Sonic Atom, is the other one that on the Mac. And I'm not as familiar. Yeah. Loud Lab is by Sonic Atom, and it has many of the things that Spectre had that you can get. Go ahead, Jeff.
And Alex, you're coming in about 6 dB down, just to let you know.
Okay.
Stuart just put up Smart from Rational Acoustics, and then there's a Spectrafoo by Metric Halo. That is a whole package of test tools. And then Isotope, which we love for RX, also has a metering thing called Insight. And then there is, and I have to look on my phone for this, I actually have an app in iOS that is Audio Tools by Studio 6 Digital. And I'll try
and
to
the
find
audio
some links
tools, and
put those
especially
in.
Smart, these are the heavy hitters. So the Smart level, the Smart meters, they're designed to to check the acoustics in a room. And so I think that they're relatively expensive, to install. But as Jeff said, that's the gold standard, for that type of thing. I was talking about more inexpensive solutions, but yes. Do you tune rooms with Smart, Jeff? Do you use it?
I use Spectrafoo.
Oh, Spectrafoo,
which is similar. They had a good educational discount, so
yeah, no, that's
it was
good.
a little cheaper entry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Smart's, I think, about $800.
Yeah, and it's a big investment, but a great app. I mean, tons and tons of detail.
The best thing about those is the ones that can do a transfer curve that allow you to use your program audio as the test signal.
Yeah.
To check speaker systems, so you can run them entirely real time and not have to listen to pink noise all the time.
There's that. Next question.
Our show good friend Hasmuk Gajar in Cape Town, South Africa, says, Zoom polls. I ran 2 polls and screen captured the poll results of the first poll and not the second poll. In Zoom, looking into the previous meeting poll tab, the poll with questions are there, but not the outcome. Is this how it is? Can I go back and I guess he's looking to recover it?
I have to look. I thought that the polls are recorded all the time from Zoom. I felt, all the data of who voted and how they voted and everything else should all be in Zoom. If it's not showing the results of that poll, that's odd for that to be the case. Because we have Q&A in Mukana. I don't have as much, I haven't used the Zoom polls in a long time, but I think that it keeps all that data in the back end. I know other people, almost everything else is kept in the back end. So I don't have a good answer though. All right. Next question. Sorry about that.
Moving back to James in Dublin. In order to retain viewers, do the panel have any tips for opening sequences and statements?
Mine's like the worst example of how we start this show. It's like the example of what you should not do is to have like a long bit of silence with no one doing anything for a couple minutes. And so, or for a minute or 30 seconds. And so that's like the worst way to start, but we do it all the time. People get used to it. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I'd say there's a balance. I kind of like what we do here, which is it's not a formal recitation. Some shows have an opening statement, and it's almost like somebody's reading it ahead of time, and it was written by lawyers or some committee or something. here when Alex opens the show every day, we know the themes, but he just riffs on those themes, and I think it makes it much more personal and human, so that when I have those occasions where I'm trying to do it, I'm following his lead, because I think the connection person to person is as important or more important, unless there's real legal information that you must get out exactly. I like talking more than orating about a topic.
And by the way, we're going to make an exception. Mickey has actually got his hand up, so if you can, I'm not set at co-host, so if you can let Mickey in. I just saw the hand up. We don't make that exception very often, but Mickey has, you know, special status. So anyway, what were we talking? Yeah, what I would say is that you're better off doing kind of a slow build. So for when we talk to our clients about that, we're always recommending at least 20 minutes of pre-show. I mean, that is the way to do this. Is 20 minutes of strong pre-show really makes a big difference in the overall number of viewers at the top of the hour. But there's a couple different ranks of the best pre-show is an actual show, people talking, interacting with the audience. If you think about, if you've ever been to like Letterman or something like that, there's like a whole lot of pre-show for everybody in the audience, get everybody revved up, get everyone ready to go. So having a pre-show that can talk about those things, that you're interacting with the audience, getting the audience excited about what's coming. Those are all things that are valuable. The second best thing to do is have a bunch of content that is going to get people excited, that's preferably built for this, but it can be a lot of old stuff, that just gets people excited, gives them something to watch. The third best is a countdown clock that is, just telling people when it's going to start. It's your interaction with the audience of telling them when it's going to get started. And the fourth best is a still, which is the kind of it's devastating typically. Starting soon, or just a slide up that's not moving, generally you'll lose half your audience in a minute, with one of those. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Probably not for this show, but something like maybe Sky's Elephant in the Room type show, where they do 30 seconds, but there's a visual aspect of the 30 seconds rather than we could all be sitting here like, or we could be doing funny faces or something like that. That would kind of work. But yeah, for this, the 30 seconds, it is what it is for a live show. And the
thing to remember is that when you go live on YouTube, it takes 3 to 5 minutes for everyone to get notified to show up. So, starting 30 seconds out means that whatever you said at the head of the show is probably not something that people watch. It's one of the reasons that I talk for 3 to 5 minutes at the beginning is that I'm trying to fill time with something that's useful, but I'm letting the thing, if you watch the statistics, that's when people go up is related to that first couple minutes. So it doesn't happen instantly. Stephen.
Yeah. Doing corporate all hands type things. We started having like team leads, the stuff that didn't make the agenda for the all hands, do that early. People show up for that mainly because it's people closer to them. And that has done a lot for especially our out of time zone folks. People show up at 2:00 in the morning when we did that. Right. Otherwise they look at the recording.
And again, we do this show while the show itself to YouTube starts, we basically do a pre-show of this for an hour. We open up the doors at 6:00 and there's lots of slow build up.
2 hours. Come on. 2 hours.
That's 1 hour officially. And then there's another unofficial hour. Because what's interesting is that the folks that are in the very first hour, the 5:00 hour, has become almost a completely separate group of people. Like they're I don't even see them here, so it's a completely different, show at this point. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'd like to point out that as we're at the top of the hour, we actually haven't heard anything from Mr. Fenwick for an entire hour. I have not heard his voice this whole entire hour. What's going on with that?
I'm here.
He's reflective.
I'm very reflective.
Yeah.
Plenty to brew on.
Yep. Next question.
Moving on, Michael Paley of New York metro area says, anyone have experience running online bingo games over Zoom meeting with around 100 participants? I've tested one site with a small group of participants, but not sure how well it would scale. Any general tips? B17.
I don't know. I don't think anybody else has done it. You're in the outer edge of virtual conferences, virtual bingo.
Bingo people are very dedicated to bingo. That might be a show that could work well. I don't know how you do prizes and the rest of that. There's all sorts of sweepstakes and rules and who knows?
There might be laws, yeah.
I think it's the gambling laws that make it difficult to do online. You can get away with it if you're just doing it in a fire hall, but if you start expanding out from there, it gets a little more complicated. Next question.
Ernest Floyd of Bastrop, Louisiana says, can Alex demonstrate again proper thumb placement when adjusting the headset mic?
So when we tell people how to do a headset mic, I literally go, take your thumb and put it right under where your ear is, and then use your index finger and grab it and just pull it out just a little bit, and that'll bend it just enough to get out past your without going too hard. It just turns out that that's the fulcrum that we want to use typically to pull it so that it really separates completely from the face. And anyway, I'm not going to pull it. This one's where it wants to be, but that's how I instruct people to do it. And it's pretty effective. You have to get to a point where it's like a couple steps. So it's like, put your thumb here, grab this finger, and just pull it. And that bends it out. Anyway,
and if you're opposite handed, bridges reverse everything.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
Moving on to Jonas Dattel of Reutlingen, Germany, who says, is there a way to remove the moire effect when filming with an LED wall as the background?
Oh, I just dealt with that last week. Go ahead, Stuart.
There's a couple of different ways. One is an optical low-pass filter on the camera, which is very expensive. It means changing a camera. There's another way that's really simple. Take a step backwards or a step forwards and reframe, because the distance you are to the object affects the moire on the sensor. So if you can change that, you can eliminate it or minimize it.
Go ahead, Jason.
It depends on what the LCD is going to be used for. I mean, here are a couple
LED.
Or LED. Okay, yeah, sorry. A couple that might work if, for example, it's simply projecting color. Of course, soft focus and a wide open aperture will, of course, give you a natural bokeh that will completely get rid of your distortion. The other thing you could do would be perfectly synchronize your frames or do multiples, but that's pretty tricky.
Mickey?
Yeah, along the same lines, if this is a pre-recorded thing, it could be pretty expensive, but rotoscope and some blur.
Go ahead, John.
Alex, when you had your studio in Washington with the background of was it the Capitol building or the White House? What were you using for that?
It's TV. Just it was an 80-inch TV. So it depends on what you're trying to do. So the TV works pretty well. You do have to have a certain distance or you'll get moire on that as well. Just because of pixel. Now that was a 4K TV as well. And so a 4K 80-inch right behind you works pretty well. You still need about 2 feet, 2 to 3 feet behind someone is where you need to put that. And it works way better than green screen. So if you're seated to do it in front of a green screen, you're better off with a monitor than you are with the green screen, because you don't have to worry about the keying or anything else. And you have a lot more control over it. It's all in real time and it doesn't take any extra equipment. And, it just works. So that's why every insert studio in the United States pretty much has a TV behind the person. That's what they're using typically to make that work. The science behind LED walls, I mean, I've dealt with this for the last 5 years. So as alluded to on many of the answers here, the issue that you get into is the pitch of the LED wall, the distance of the subject from the LED wall, the focal length of the camera, and the sensor size of the camera. And those are the big things that will affect where you're at, and certain zoom lengths. So certain zoom lengths will cause the moire that you're seeing. It won't be all of the zoom lengths. It will be certain ones. And it's hard to tell because it depends on the distance of the camera to the LED wall. As you increase the distance between the larger the pitch in the LED wall. So if you're like a 2.8 or 3.2, the further away you need to be from that LED wall to avoid the moire. the tighter the pitch, if you get down to 0.9 or even 0.7, you start getting into a place where you have a lot less moire, you have a lot more, because what the pitch is, when we say 2.8, it's 2.8 millimeters from center to center of each one of the little diodes that's in there. So what happens is that pitch gets smaller, you get a lot more to work with. But as that pitch, the average screen is like 2.8, right? That's an average LED wall. At that range, you need to be approximately 20 to 25 feet from that screen, with a Super 35 set relatively wide to make that work. And even then, you might see some the focal length, because as you increase the focal length, you're going to decrease the depth of field. And as you decrease that depth of field, you have to get to a point where every pixel is blended to the next pixel, and you can actually see it on a scope. So what's interesting about an LED wall is when you zoom in, you may not see it immediately in your eye, but as you look at the scope, there'll be something that looks like a chain link fence. That chain link fence is your LED wall moraine. So you can see moraine on the scopes before you can see it with your eyes. And so there's and I literally spent a day doing this, just testing an LED wall last week. So it's very, very fresh for me. So what we're testing specifically were focal lengths and distance to screen and lighting and so on and so forth. When it works, it's amazing. I would say that in most average facilities, now, if you look at the Mandalorian, they have a very large, it's 75 or 100 feet. I think the new one was 100 feet in diameter. So that means that generally everything there is about 30 to 40 feet from the back, the subject that they're zooming in on, and they're doing shorter depth of field, and there's a bunch of things that they're doing there. And even then, if you look at the first season, when you look at the close-ups of them when they're in front of there's this weird little thing in the bokeh, and that's the LED wall back there. It took me a while. I thought that they were doing that as an effect. It was driving me crazy until I figured out they're in front of an LED wall. And so they're still struggling with it, even for Mandalorian, if you look at the bokeh. So it can be done. I think that the only company that I've seen do LED walls successfully in an event without any moire is Apple. Like those LED walls are, but I don't know what they are, but they're dense. And so outside of that, almost everybody else gets some moire. And the walls that you need to do to make it really work are expensive, and so anyway, that's the way to get rid of it. Getting it further back, which means it has to be bigger, which means it has to be, longer focal length, shorter depth of field. I would never try to do an LED wall with a 2/3 inch chip. You want to start at Super 35. And then you just have to decide if you really need it. The technology is going to get a lot better, but where we're at right now it's a pretty tricky thing to work out. Go ahead, Bill.
I just thought I'd note for those of you who are listening and not watching us, and you're doing a search because you want to learn more and you're getting eels, this moire is MOIRE, not MORAY. Okay. It's a different thing.
All right. We are running a little low on questions. So if this will be a short show, if we don't get more questions. So if you were thinking about questions, this is the right time to ask those questions. All right, next question.
Scotius of Ann Arbor, Michigan. For various reasons, I've held out a long time, but I have a late 2013 iMac on Yosemite 10.10.5 and a 3 terabyte Fusion drive formatted HFS Plus. Any downside or gotchas to upgrading to High Sierra 10.13? I think it'll definitely convert the file system to AFPS. Is that correct? And
go, Jason.
The downside is that you are doubling your number of points of failure. You should not be using a Fusion drive. I've been more and more and more adamant about this as I've seen what happens when it doesn't go right. The answer is yes, it should work. It should convert to APFS. If it goes even a little bit wrong, if there is even a slightly, if a bit is flipped, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So use Super Duper, do a backup. If I were you, I would completely remove the Fusion drive. iFixit it makes it easy to take it to an SSD. They're just not expensive anymore.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, we bought 3 of those Fusion drive iMacs in the same day, and within a month and a half of each other, 3 years later, they all failed. They will fail, and what will happen is simple processes will start to take ridiculously long, like saving file. Like, whoa, why did that take 5 minutes to save that file? Opening an app takes way too long. It's like, stop right then, and then do what Jason said. Look for those things that are happening super slow, but you got to get off those Fusion drives. They were great at first, and then they go bad.
And my recommendation is get a 3 terabyte internal drive is a recipe for disaster. I mean, in my opinion, I think that I keep all of my data outside of the computer. So, keep it on an external drive. You need a 1 terabyte max. The only argument for keeping a larger drive internally is that the iPhoto, if you put the iPhoto library on an external drive, it will, and it gets too big, it will not, because it's too big for your internal drive. It will not auto sync to an external drive, at least that I found. Like, I can't get iPhoto to sync on one of my computers because I moved the iPhoto library off the home drive, and so it's a little bit of annoying. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Jason.
The other gotcha I'd watch out for is be very careful to check that all of your third-party software is compatible with High Sierra. Yeah. Otherwise, you may not be able to go back. Yeah, and Jason. That includes things like Dante Virtual Sound Card and all kinds of, especially audio software. I know this is something I watch out for.
Jason.
Yeah, the iPhoto, Hereafter Photos library, which is extremely confusing, can be put onto an external drive. They made that change right around the time, if you remember, when Logic could be downloaded and then moved to an external drive. That massive.
Well, the iPhoto library works fine. It just won't sync. It'll tell me that it won't sync because it's not in the system folder.
Yeah, there's a way to do it, but it's a massive pain. So right. Let me put it this way. I don't think you should do it because you're going to be in terminal and you're going to be troubleshooting it.
Yep. Next question.
Ryan Jurgen is back from Columbus, Ohio with what's your favorite full NDI encoder and what consideration should I take when implementing NDI to replace NDI HX in my network?
I think we lost Stuart. Right? Oh, no, there he is. He just jumped in space for me. You're in a different place. You were down below and now you're up high. So do you have a favorite NDI encoder, Stuart?
vMix.
But but I think that the question is I believe that
hardware-wise, the
hardware
one with the best reputation is probably BirdDog, and they've got two-way comms set up on theirs now as well. So
that's good. Guy, is BirdDog kind of the?
Yeah, I was going to recommend BirdDog as well. So, and then as far as any considerations, if you're going full, depends on if you're going to go up over 8, that'll saturate the 1 gigabit, so you might need to go to 10G. And then also you might want to get an NDI discovery server when you start to get multiples like that, so that they know where they're at and they just kind of check in instead of multicasting and flooding your network, or at least VLAN it out at the very least.
Absolutely. Next question.
Maggie Barton Baird from Edmonton, Canada. Any virtual game platforms that you've enjoyed either using as a producer or as a user? I have a client looking for virtual games for their event for over 3,000 people.
I'm going to tell the story. I've told this one before. We connected comments. We did this by hand, but you could do it. We connected comments to a flamethrower. So it wasn't really a game. It was just that if you hit fire enough, the flamethrower would go off, 30 feet of flame. We took out a Facebook event because I don't think the database could handle it. It's 140,000 interactions a minute. People were really excited about it. I point to that because while it was a pretty horrible day for me, because we didn't know at the time what was causing the problem. We were afraid it was us. It wasn't us. What it points to is the idea, just think about the idea of interacting with physical items in the real world using Arduino with your event. And so if you can read the comments, if you can read polls, if you can read other things, interacting with physical items, and Arduino is your kind of bridge to do that. It turns your database into electrical impulses, which can then interact with anything. It's interesting. It's probably some of the more interesting things that we've seen. I know that's probably not the answer that you wanted to hear from this, but I would put it out there that when we've done a couple other ones like that, and the response is insane. Like, it just turns the whole thing into a whole different world. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say, if you know an elementary school teacher, poll them about what works in classroom situations with kids. I'm not saying you use that exactly, but they'll have all sorts of experiences on when there's downtime playing games with their classes that are simple enough to be scalable. And you might have to sophisticate it up if you're dealing with adults rather than kids, but they'll have a lot of ideas for keeping a group engaged for 10 minutes.
Next question.
David Brady in New York says, is there an easy fix to resolve jitter in the network stats when managing Zoom calls?
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to assume that you actually mean jitter that you have measured using a jitter tool. Couple things you can do. Use better DNS, get a better router, prioritize those packets through the router. There's also an advanced setting in Zoom where you can actually increase the priority of the Zoom packets that are coming to you. Barring that, shut off your Wi-Fi, switch out your network cable, and whatever you do, make sure it's current. You know, don't run stuff in the background.
Sorry, Wi-Fi is going to increase it. Cellular is going to increase it. And bonding of any kind or any sharing will massively multiply your jitter. So those are the things to kind of keep in mind. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'd also try to figure out whether the jitter is happening locally in your internal network or in your actual connectivity out to the internet. Because fixing it in your network internally could be, fairly straightforward depending on what exactly it is. But if it's your connectivity, then that's pretty tricky to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Michael Patrick in Chicago says, has anyone on the panel worked with extended reality systems, camera sensors driving Unity POV, driving LED walls?
Typically, the easiest way to, there's a couple different ways to approach that. The new Panasonic cameras have telemetry that'll go back to Unreal Engine. So I think it's the 150s, I believe, have a telemetry data port to send back their positioning data, not position, but pan tilt zoom data. And so that will allow you to integrate it with Unity. Then you start really getting into things like Stipe, STYPE, and other engines like that. Most of them are pretty expensive. They start to really add up when you start to go through that. Also, if you're really looking at the real issue that you get into is, remember that most of the stuff is single camera solutions because you're distorting the Unreal Engine to match the camera position. So if you're talking about multi-camera, what you have to do at that point is you have to connect the switcher to Unreal so that you're actually within a frame switching, and watching it on set is more complex. It might give you epileptic seizures if you're cutting fast because you're literally changing the whole background every time you cut the camera. But if you're trying to do something like that, but when you're tracking that information, there's Mosys also makes another tracking, but there's not a lot of, and then there are some people using tracking. I know that some people are using HTC and Oculus to do the tracking, where it's kind of a little bit more hand built. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'd just like to point out a comment in the chat which reads, the Unity he is talking about is a 3D engine like Unreal, not Unity Comms, from Tucker Dragoo.
Yeah. So I'm mostly familiar with the Unreal solutions, but most of them work in Unity as well. And so the one thing to know is that Unity, if you're trying to bring these into broadcast of any kind, Unity is a 30p versus 2997 solution, and that will cause problems in the broadcast world. Unity has decided it didn't really care about or didn't prioritize, broadcast, whereas Unreal has. And so that's why I know Unreal probably better than Unity. But we started all of our R&D with Unity, and what we did there is, and we've been doing point of view motion capture since the 2003, 2004. So it's not like the idea of getting positional data from a potential camera rig is something that is a well-known thing. You can use, small motion capture systems. Again, HTC, you can take the HTC controller, people will mount them on top of their camera, and then there's HTC software out there that will then track that data and you can drive it. Now I know mostly again about how it drives into Unreal, but you can also, we've done it with motion capture, driving it into Unity. So those are all, it's just a matter of sending that telemetry data back. So I would do some, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to, off the top of my head, come up with the person who's been doing most of the R&D on this, that posts on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I just can't think of it right now. But we go to the next question. We might come back to that one, so I can give you the link.
Sure.
Anyway, let's go to the next question.
Yeah, Brian Smith of Chicago says, was there a mention, or there was a mention of using an ATEM Mini and desktop apps on a recent episode? Does this use the USB webcam feature of the ATEM? How does the USB video quality compare to program HDMI?
And no one raised their hand. Cinetracer, by the way, let me just to go back to that one. Cinetracer is the one you want to look at. That's probably the one that is the most developed for Unreal. Go ahead, Jason.
So it's going to depend upon the settings that you're using. So basically, the ATEM Mini that is using the webcam is going to, unless I'm mistaken, is going to basically be set up for the bit rate of whatever your record rate is, unless I'm thinking of the Pro, in which case I could be totally wrong on there.
I don't quite understand the question, I think is my problem, is I don't know what you're trying to do. So maybe re-ask that question. I just don't understand what that means. Next question.
Sure. Nick Paviniak, I'm sorry, I'm probably mangling the name. Southeast Michigan is where he's coming in from. Does anyone on the panel have experience with the NFL Skycams? Amazing tech, and can you talk about it? Alex, I think you've talked about those before.
Yeah, so the Skycam has it's a two operator solution. Those operators tend to work together all season, and for other things they kind of become a team. They sat right next to me I was an A2 for the calls, and that means that I ran cards, mostly on a Green Bay game, and so the Skycam, there's one person controlling the position of the Skycam, and there's another person controlling pan tilt zoom of the Skycam. And so what's interesting about it is they get into these grooves where they practice, like they'll call out basically a play for them. Let's do this, and they have a name for it. And then that person comes down and they work very, very closely together. But it truly is a two-person dance that they do between those cameras to get those big sweeping shots where they come down and they come around like this. But there's two people sitting there doing that the whole show.
So in high school football parlance, if they're saying a sweep left, and then they know exactly where the play is going.
Yeah, I don't remember what the names were of their calls.
Yeah,
but
they're more sophisticated.
Let's do this, and then they know what that means. They have shorthand that allows them to kind of operate that as they work. Go ahead, Chris.
Interesting.
It's kind of similar to some of the more advanced drone systems where one person flies the drone, the other one runs the camera, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And do they sit like right next to each other, Alex?
Yeah, they sit right next to each other in a box that's above the field, and it's a very specialized skill set.
Can you imagine the number of meetings it took to convince the NFL to let them run a cable over the field the first time?
Well, the way it works typically on a lot of this technology is someone will recommend doing it in high school. They'll do it at high school games, and it turns out Texas is a really popular. Texas is a popular place to test things because the fields are almost as big as some of the pro, so you can put the height and they always want to do the next big thing, right? It's Texas. And so you get a lot of testing, and then it gets to usually collegiate, things start getting tested. Like they're testing right now, they're testing telemetry out of the basketballs. So in the basketball, there's sensors they figured out how to keep the weights exactly right so that you can bounce it, and they know exactly where that is, and the impact and speed and velocity and all those other things. But NBA is like, why don't we try that? The NBA only changes the rules every 5 years, so it's a very slow process. And so, but the NCAA will let them be more aggressive. And so anyway, so it usually builds up through tests and then possibly high school, but then NCAA, and then they prove it, and then they go into it. Now, the only thing that changes there are things that in the NFL that will affect the broadcast dramatically, and you'll always see them testing something oftentimes in the playoffs as they get ready for. So what we're seeing tested in these playoffs and in the last couple games is the short depth of field at the end of the, so in the last 20 yards, anytime there's a stop, there's a guy out there with a Sony, you know, and they're doing, it's a pretty cool rig, and they're running out and you're getting these super short depth of field shots in the back, which look amazing. I mean, just amazing in my opinion. And so they're doing that. They're also doing this 3D box that they sit on the field and track into the field. They're not doing it in real time yet, but they're working on it. So that it sits there. It's got like this stand up. It was on last night. I mostly watch football games to just track the graphics, like to look at what they're doing with those things. And so they're now sitting this like what looks like a real time or near real time. And then they have all these graphics that are showing it. And so NFL just, they're generally printing money, and their only job is to keep on making it more exciting. Like the pylon, putting the cameras in the pylons was like something that you saw like in 2 shots in a Super Bowl, like 5 years ago. Now they show it all the time. Go ahead, Sky.
I think there is also a test stadium in New Jersey because they put a lot of money into a studio facility. And I think all of the stadiums are wired to a central location. So there's a, like you said, printing money, but they are well ahead.
I've never been to it, but I've heard that there's a test stadium that they use. It's some old stadium that they've used as R&D.
Yeah, like in New England somewhere, it's cold.
We'll see if we can drag somebody in from the NFL to talk about it. I don't know if they will talk about it, but it'd be fun to kind of drag it out. But it's where there's just a lot of money in the production value in general, except for the CBS this weird scorecard thing that has aliasing. I don't quite understand. I think it's an Unreal test that isn't quite working, but they still seem to use it. I don't know how that doesn't bother them. Anyway, next question.
Kyle Hammond in Chicago's in with, I'm trying to add comments from Twitch into Mimo Live, but something isn't connecting properly. Is there a way to test without actually going live?
Go ahead, Chris.
I don't have a specific answer, but I just want to thank Oliver if he's listening, because I've had some issues and I've been able to post on Discord, and Oliver's super responsive to input from the group. So you may want to talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the advantages that I found with Mimo is that Oliver is really responsive, like that to us, as a group. And so I think that, I feel very, like we get support, and I think that support is as important as the product itself. But anyway, so I think that Mimo Live has been really successful for a lot of us because he's always paying attention, sometimes showing up here. It's one of the reasons that we're leaning into the stuff that we're doing with Zoom OSC is because Andy's here a lot, and so we were like, okay, well, that's part of the community, and we know that we're going to get support. Chris?
Yeah, you've said in the past that one of the biggest things that companies do wrong is training, and it's the one thing, you can make a great product, but if people don't understand it, what does it matter? And I was thinking about that the other day when I was trying to figure something out, and it's so true. It's amazing that more companies aren't more deeply involved in that. I don't get it. A lot of times they'll lean on third-party people. I mean, if you look at the relationship between Apple and Ripple, it's like they're sort of the de facto training department, but surprising companies aren't deeper into the whole training world.
Yeah. I mean, in a really organized way to, because you get, it's yeah. I mean, I think that I find that the wetware, as I would call it, is the wetware development is very, very under, because I think no one really gets it. Like, oh, we made a manual, and they just, there is a thing and there's lots of online resources, but the companies that, there was a poll that went out for programmers, and they were talking about their favorite coding language. And I think the most popular one, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe is Python. And one of the reasons that Python is the most, I mean, literally programmers in the poll, like 70% said because of the resources, the learning resources. Like that's why they use it, is because there's lots of resources to go find out how to use it. And I'm always surprised that people don't cue off on that, is that, it's one thing to have the product. There's another thing to know where all the widgets are. And the more seamless you make that, the people get attached to the product because they know how to use it. It's really hard to pull people out of a product. Once they really know how to use it, it's hard to get them to use something else. Next question.
Michael Marsh in San Anselmo, California says I've had a program feed delivered completely out of sync. ISO was fine, but MP4 was scrambled, repeating occasionally. I've had this happen before in audio files. What causes this corruption?
Typically, it's some kind of CPU issue. I mean, of whatever the device is. I mean, I don't know what you're recording the ISOs on. If you're recording them on a computer, not a dedicated device, this is where this comes up a lot. So, and again, the problem with the computer recordings, why I don't typically use computers to record my audio. I usually use low level, I want something that about as computery as I go is the A10 Mini. So to record ISOs, I like things to be hardline because they stay in sync. The problem is that the computer gets overloaded, it checks the email, it does something, and everything can come out of sync. Again, we were talking about earlier that the video takes more time to write than the audio. And so the audio typically gets ahead, and where you really get into trouble is a computer that gets hit. So if you're recording on a computer, you can do it, but when I do that, I want to see my CPU usage under 35%. Like I just want tons and tons of headroom, and I don't want that computer to do anything else other than record. Like I don't want it to be the back end of vMix or the back end of OBS or the back end of anything else. I want it to it's a recorder, and it's got tons of headroom. And that's how you keep things in sync. But I've definitely seen that a lot, and it's almost every time it was a CPU-based recording unit. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I just say a lot of people have never opened console or one of the things that tracks usage of what your computer is doing while you think you're just working in Paint or something like that. I remember the first time I did it decades ago, and I was just astonished at how many polling things are constantly hitting your operating system and just your whole computer experience, looking for attention from the CPU or the GPU or something. I mean, it's just thousands of things happening every second sometimes, and it's amazing it all works.
Yep, Chris.
Speaking of pulling your computer, show of hands, how many people run a Pi-hole at home? I knew Jason would raise his hand.
I mean, I have. I now have much more industrial stuff, but oh boy, is it a great solution.
What is it?
Just,
what is it? What are you doing?
Pi-hole is just an extremely fast, like real-time firewall, for lack of a better term. It's just like a really easy to customize type, in, out, and through that can be done on a Raspberry Pi.
And it cleans up a lot of the kind of extraneous
internet background radiation, right?
I'm asking your computer a bunch of things. So what are you using beyond a Pi-hole?
It depends on the situation. In the studio, I have two separate. This is way.
Okay,
are we like running really short on questions? Because you want an hour on this,
Alex.
Fenwick?
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Mac just launched Activity Monitor.
We need a
Mac Activity Monitor will tell you a lot of what's going on.
Yep. Next question.
All right, moving along. Michael Paley of New York Metro is in, and he's asking a nice, simple, how do you check the video resolution of a Zoom session?
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and the Zoom preferences go to statistics, and then in there is a video tab, and you will be able to see the resolution. But bear in mind that what you're sending will only be the resolution that other people are watching you at. So if there's no one looking at your video in full screen, it probably wouldn't be 720p or 1080p. And also the other way around. If you are just looking at the gallery view where it's just little thumbnails, you won't see a full resolution like 720 or 1080p feed that you're receiving.
Next question. Moving on to Michael Marsh of San Anselmo again. Anybody using Raspberry Pi for any interesting video solutions? I was, and I don't know what the software is, but there was an AWS engineer that I was working with, and he has it all tied with his Elemental link in his thing, and he could just tell Alexa to start doing things. I'll pause here for a second so that she doesn't do anything for you guys. But anyway, I shouldn't have said that word. Anyway, it's funny, by the way, in the last project, we had two Alexes and one Alexis. And it makes it very complicated if you have an Alexa around. It becomes a thing. So anyway, anyway, she's just constantly in the background. I think of almost every meeting, you could hear her say something. You know, like, you know, like
don't name your dog Siri.
Anyway, but he could say something and it would just start streaming and start playing back video automatically. And so those are fun little things. We are going to have Jonas Dattell on to talk about his HyperDeck solution, his HyperDeck-like solution. He's just, I think, not next week, but the week after. I think we're looking at having him come on and do a second hour. So I think that's a pretty cool video project. Jason and then John.
Companion.io is one of my very favorite open source projects for AV. I run Companion Pi entirely on a Raspberry Pi 4, and it just takes all the load off, you know, which computer is it on? It's just a box, and it does its thing, and I don't even have a monitor hooked up to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah, John?
I do projection mapping for Christmas and Halloween, and I use Raspberry Pis to do that. So I don't have expensive computers outside my house. I have like 4 projectors sitting outside the house with Raspberry Pis, projecting onto pumpkins and singing and ants and all kinds of stuff. And I can tell that into
video of that somewhere. I want to see the video.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Video where it didn't happen.
Yeah, it's up on YouTube.
Okay. All right.
We'll take a look at it.
I'll grab it one day and load it up.
Yeah.
It's really cool. The kids go crazy. I've had over 200 trick-or-treaters at every Halloween.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Next question.
Nice. Shane Foley of Ashland, Oregon's up next with, I plan to create a private web series for my friends it's based on This Is Your Life with me as the host. What's the smart strategy for having contributors record and submit their video stories to a central web location? Most will want to use their mobile phones and may need multiple takes and so forth. Thanks.
Jason?
There's no reason not to do something as insanely simple as a public Dropbox folder or a public G Drive folder. That's the easiest way I can think to do it.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, we've done that a couple of times in corporate settings for people to submit videos to a central thing that we're going to turn around into a video. We've done as simple as if you're on a little iOS device, a phone or something, to attach it to an email and send it in. Those are where we limit it to a short period of time, so maybe a minute or something like that. That works. We've also used iCloud as a storage thing and had people upload them to there. And then at the top end, you're using something like Frame.io or Vimeo and giving people a link that they can post stuff into there.
Good, Sky.
To Bill's point, the iCloud concept is that you can share your albums. So I'm kind of starting to experiment how much can you share a video in that concept, so that way at least on the iOS devices.
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Bill mentioned Frame.io, and I think Frame.io is a very powerful tool. Just whichever service you use, just keep in mind that it's important to set an organizational structure for your files. Like, everyone, like say you have a folder named John Doe or whatever, then within that maybe broken down into dates or something like that. But everyone needs to follow that and keep that file system in mind.
Don't let Chris do it.
Are you talking to me, Mickey?
All right. The one thing to think about is this gets back into the conversation we had about wetware development. So the time you spend building a guide for people to record that really outlines all the bits and pieces of what they need and have them do samples, you'll spend a lot less time or frustration later. So exactly what do they have to set their camera to, exactly where they should put it down, exactly how they should set it up, and have them possibly do a Zoom session with you through their camera, where they're going to have it on a tripod, where they're going to put it up, where the lights are, work that out with them, and then have them start to record. So what I would do is be on a call with them and get it to a point where you're happy with it. You're happy with the audio, you're happy with the video. My favorite thing, I was the darkroom head for my yearbook, and on every single page of the guide for the yearbook that the yearbook company gives us, it said reproduction will not improve the quality of your images. I just kept on saying that reproduction will not improve the quality of your images. And I took that very seriously. So my yearbook was probably the cleanest one ever, because I would develop over and over and over again to get them just right. And so anyway, but get it to where you want it, give people clear ideas of how to do it. get them to do something short and upload it, then have them do whatever they're going to do in the exact same format, preferably at the exact same time. It's a little extra effort, and it's a little effort that will save you a lot of effort later. Go ahead. Fixing cell phone footage in post is a real bummer. Bill, and then Mickey, and then Stuart, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, one more thing is also because some people are just, they don't understand, they have never had a lot of content, particularly digital content, coming to them before. So I find it normal that people don't realize that when you're reading your email, that attachment's going into your email folder. Unless you're moving it, sometimes you're copying it onto an external drive. And the next thing you know, you look around and you've got no overhead room in your system because there's a buried folder with tons of this new digital content that you don't have a workflow for storing off of things. And suddenly your computer is misfiring because you're just completely out of storage.
Mickey, and then Stuart.
And yeah, I think that just specific to this kind of show, it might be prudent to make it the least like barrier to entry in terms of people shooting material and giving it to you. So if you want to go ahead and make these, like I mentioned earlier, making a folder structure, maybe make it for them instead of them having to type things out. Just lessen the steps that they have to do to give you material. Because
I would definitely
like
have each person gets their own folder. All they have to do is click the link and put it in. They don't, and they're not. It's not a shared folder. It's just their folder, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Stuart.
Prior to the sharing and what have you, Shane, landscape mode, landscape mode, landscape mode. If they're going to use their phones, hold it that way. There's two reasons for that. One is if you're putting it to somewhere like YouTube, it'll want to be landscape mode. If you're putting it on TikTok, yeah, sure, 9:16. But if you specify landscape mode and somebody hands in some video that is, shall we say, not of publishable quality, you can point out to them that, oh, look, you've put it in 16:9, I need it in 9:6, or sorry, you put it in 9:16, I need it in 16:9. Give yourself an out to reject footage that is not good enough and edit the footage quality-wise, even if it means involving a few people as your, what do they call it, committee?
And what I would say is that, just remember that it might be some expense, or if you send people some lights, or you send them a little bit of something like a China ball or something, there's a little bit of expense. Just remember that your time is expensive too. And you're going to put a lot of time into an event, like a process like this, you're going to put a lot of time into. So if you cut corners at the beginning of either setup or helping them make sure that they look and sound good, you're just going to come out with a product that you're not very happy with, or that takes you an enormous amount of time, and you'll wish that you had sent them a couple little things or done whatever to make it worth doing, or had them do it. Send them if they're really engaged, have them like, here's the kit that you need to buy, to look good, that kind of thing. Go ahead, Mickey.
And yeah, something as simple as a road go will make a lot of your footage actually watchable.
Yeah, go ahead. Stuart, and then Chris.
Just before we move on, there's a link in the chat now for some of John Pretto's video with the projection. And you got to admit, the ghosts on the inside of the garage wall is very effective.
That's awesome. Go ahead, Chris.
I can't echo more emphatically the fact that doing the work on the head end so you're not fighting it in post. Like I a couple months ago had a project where the audio came back just horrible. And we went through like 3 cycles of people going, are you sure you can't make it any better? I'm like, no, it's awful. It's awful. It should have been rejected in the, let's just try one more time. Like, okay, we'll try one more time. It's going to be different, but it's still going to be awful.
Yep, Bill.
And just remember, we now have the most powerful location scouting tool in the world, which is our phones. So connect with the person, and when they're going to shoot their video, and just take a look at it real quick. Because sometimes saying, you got a window behind you, just move over a little bit, and can you turn that lamp on? And you'll get 1,000% quality increase. So you can do that kind of thing now easily, where we never could before.
Yep. Next question.
Moving to Henry Ramos of Yonkers, New York. Can the group shed any light on the Zoom Video Advanced settings? I've switched off hardware acceleration because I need my NVIDIA encoders in vMix, and switched video rendering to GDI for clearer desktop capture. for cleaner desktop capture, but no idea what the rest does and if I'm missing anything I should be setting up better.
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I don't really think that you're going to see much because what those are doing is the Video Advanced is doing things like clean up, touch up my appearance. There's the 49 gallery view that's also taking advantage of that. Some of the filters and then the green screen. So I don't think you're going to take any hit or you need to really worry about that. But my question is, why are you using vMix and Zoom at the same time? Unless you're doing what I'm doing. I'm doing it right now, but like, to me, it's so lightweight, you know, like my processor's at like 30. So it doesn't really, I'd leave it on because I want to see my gallery view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Stuart.
Henry, if you can use two computers, both for the points that Alex was making earlier in the program about the loading on the CPU, but it will just mean it's a lot more straightforward. You don't have to fiddle with too many of the things like the NVIC encoder settings.
And one of the things I'm going to be testing is like the Courtney's PC. I'm more comfortable with the idea of using that little PC for a couple $100 than running both of those systems on the same thing. So it's just something to think about there. Next question.
Our friend and occasional panelist, Charles Klein in New York City, says, Alex, during a post show, you mentioned discrepancies between the scopes in Resolve and your standalone scopes. What standalone scopes are you using, and did you find the catalyst to be the issue, or the catalyst to the issue?
We haven't found a solution yet for it. What we're using is the AJA image analyzer is the hardware scope that we're using. And then we're comparing the scopes on the same frame. So what we're doing is have an Ultra Studio Mini doing SDI out from Resolve. Looking at the same frame, we're seeing that the scopes are different between the scopes inside of Resolve and the scopes that we're seeing from the image analyzer. And we're trying to figure out why. Now, this could be a mixture. This could be an issue where we're mismatching data and video output with the scopes, and we're trying to solve that right now. So, but so far, we're seeing that discrepancy, and it's a couple hundred nits, which for us is a big deal. So for a lot of the work that we're doing, we're trying to maximize the HDR values, and we're trying to get right up to 1,000 nits. And the problem we get into is when the target's off by a couple hundred, and what we see from our eye is that when we look at something at 1,000 nits on the image analyzer, it looks correct on our HDR monitor. When we look at it, when we do 1,000 nits on Resolve, we feel like we're seeing, and this is Resolve 17, we feel like we're seeing it a little overexposed. So we think that there's something going on there that we haven't got our head around yet as far as that display and process. So we see the discrepancy. We don't know why, and we'll get back to you when we do. But there's part of this week is me figuring out. I have to. The image analyzer is going to be testing somewhere else this week, but I'm going to be working on it today and a couple other days, trying to figure this out. But we haven't gotten to the bottom of it yet. Next question.
Art by Jr. of Cupertino says, I'm taking over as technical director at a church. Blackmagic shop, Blackmagic products have limitations that prevent me from white balancing like I do at my first church. I think RGB Parade is the answer. Could we go over that? And he notes Blackmagic scopes do not have the ability to magnify the waveform of the white clips on a chip chart.
So I'm trying to figure out how to describe how to do this for balance. So the first thing we do is we worry about the camera looking the way we want it to look. We worry less about white balance and more about the first camera being exactly what we want it to look like. We make a visual decision about what that looks like. We then, or at least I then, usually have a set of charts that I put up. Now I use ChromaDemond, DSC Labs ChromaDemond charts to match the cameras, but I think you could probably use a lot of different things that have colors. Basically what you want to do, it could be a set of colors that they don't have to, because I'm not using them for the vector scope. I don't, the colors can be a little off here and there. What I do is I cut the colors in half from one camera to the other, in a controlled environment. And I start adjusting the colors in Blackmagic so that the two color that along that line that they're being sliced in half, where basically the boxes are sharing. And I'm actually going to show this. DSC Labs is sending me a chart. So we'll show this soon on the show, but I cut that out and I match it until I don't see a line. And when I don't see a line, those two cameras look exactly the same. The advantage of that is it doesn't require a lot of scopes and everything else to make it work. Now, what we tend to do when we have the gradients, going across of colors, is that we will increase the gain in the lift to pull the black and white levels to where they all match all the way across. And then we do that in each color to kind of pull them all together if you have a black and white image that goes across. But I find it easier, more accurate to use colors, than just the black and white. It won't be enough to get the white balance. I mean, you can get white balance, but you can't take advantage of the small idiosyncrasies of color based on the coatings on the lenses to get it just right. And so you need kind of a strong color chart to do that. And again, I don't have another solution other than the DSC Labs, because it's just the one I've always used, but I can show how I do it. One of the things we're working on now is that you can use the X-Rite. I think I have it here somewhere, but anyway, you can use an X-Rite in Resolve to color correct an image. So you put it up there, and then Resolve, you pull it across and tell it what X-Rite you're doing, and it'll automatically build a color correction that will match the camera. Now, you're wondering, why would you care about that in Resolve? Well, you can then save we haven't done yet, but it works in my head. Save that out as a LUT and then put it back into the camera. And then that, for each camera, and it should, we believe in our heads, it will tie all the cameras together, if you do that. And so we're kind of working on, we're pushing, we think Blackmagic should do that automatically in the switcher, but we have a roundabout way of making that work. It's a little bit of extra work, but if you want to be super precise, it's one way to do it. If you don't trust your eyes, if it works, and we'll let you know, because we're going to be working on this in the over this week. Actually, I'm doing something else with it, but it's similar. But that's the kind of thing that is. I will say that not just because like I've been using the DSC Labs stuff for 15 years. It's the only thing I admit it's the only thing I really know how to do. So go ahead. And the simplest thing is just splitting it between one camera to the other and then playing with it. I will say, as someone who came from Sony and Canon and thought that Blackmagic was crazy, their color correction was the stupidest thing I'd ever seen, I could never go back. Like the amount of control you have in a Blackmagic switcher with the cameras when you're able to shade them is bar none the best way to approach it. And I hated it when it came out. I was like, how can you correct cameras if you don't have R minus G and G minus R and blah, 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 blah. I was like completely against it. And I've now, after years, I open up a Sony camera and I'm like, oh, this is going to be horrible. Bill, and then Stuart.
I come from the old days where white balance was a gross setting on a camera that got you nearby. It was never meant in those early days to be a precision thing. And I always realized that once you set it up for something, if you have a fixed position like a church circumstance, I wouldn't white balance maybe once every 6 months or once every year, unless the light is changing substantially. Now,
so I will argue with that.
Well, I'm just saying this is how we used to do it back in the old days. You start with a white balance on a camera to get the camera close, but you didn't precision match things, because every camera's position is going to change the color temperature and the amount of light coming into that camera, because usually you don't have a really even field.
I have to apologize. I completely disagree with you.
Okay, good.
That's what I do all the time. I mean, like, this is like one of my little mini religions is matching cameras, and so
shading cameras is a huge deal. And I'm not denying that.
So for me, it's shading a camera is part of every event. Like every event, I shade a camera. If I was at a church, I would shade it every Saturday evening or every Sunday morning. It would be part of what we do. I don't do it. I don't shade the cameras in place because you can't get the things to match. I put the cameras next to each other one at a time. I get the master camera and I just keep on adding cameras to it to tie it together. And then you put them all back. But I would always the thing is that it's just, it can be done, and it just has to be done in a controlled environment. And it doesn't matter if they're all matching. It doesn't matter where they are in the space. They are accurate at that point in that color space. It may look a little different when you look at it, but they are accurate. They're going to show skin tones and everything else when they're done correctly, not when they're white balanced together, but when they're actually matched. they'll always match each other depending on no matter where they are on because you're not correcting for the space, you're correcting for the camera science, and you're correcting for the lens lens coatings.
So you don't mind if camera 2 has more outside open doorway back there and it's flooding in 5600, you've lit mostly for tungsten because it's an older church and they don't have
you
LEDs.
match the cameras for where they are, for what they're doing, but they'll always react. You could even change their color temperature, but you're getting all the cameras to look at it the same way. Yeah, I would never be having them in different spaces. I mean, if I'm in different spaces, I correct them for those spaces. The other thing is that what I'm talking about is shooting a stage where, if you're shooting that stage, it doesn't matter where the light is hitting the stage the same way. It's not, it doesn't matter where the camera is. Anyway, okay. Stuart.
I guess I just come from a different thing where I expect the camera to start in one color temperature, maybe move to another one as the things shift around, and that no real world circumstance does the shot that I set it up with equal necessarily the other shots I'm going to be going to as things evolve through the course of the
We may
event.
change all the cameras that way, but once they're once they're matched, you may change all the cameras' color temperature. And then they should match all the way through, because the other adjustments that you're making, the color temperature, you can keep on changing for the camera to camera to camera, but I would change all of them. I wouldn't, or if there was one that was in a completely different scene, of course, I would have it be the white balance for that scene. But if I'm shooting them, but that camera doesn't have to match. Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I just see it more like a recording music, where if the band is playing soft and I set my level, I have to realize that the band can start playing louder. And to me, that is the same as shifting a light through the course of event that I might be doing over the course of time. But they're both reasonable things to think about, just different approaches.
Yeah. Next question. Stuart, go ahead.
I'd just like to point out two things. Firstly, kids, that's the last 5 minutes, maybe the last 10 minutes, is how engineers talk about art. Okay. Just one thing, and I hope I'm absolutely wrong on this, Alex. But I know from, like, in Resolve, if I go and do a color space transform, I can't export that as a LUT. So I hope I'm wrong, but I don't expect the process with the color chips to actually work as a LUT. But just be aware of that one.
We're working on it. Yeah, there may be a workaround for that. Go ahead, Chris.
I would like to volunteer to do a second hour someday on how to register old tube cameras. I could actually teach that if you're interested.
Next
you
question.
Just have to find old tube cameras to work with. Moving along.
I can probably help on that, Bill, because I know somebody with a couple. Sony ones.
John Murphy of Wellington is in with the next question. And John says, I'm planning a weekly 3-session event for an NFP. I'm not sure what the NFP means in that. The first session is a discussion just between 4 people, and I'm uncertain what to use: webinar, StreamYard, Mimo Live, or something else. The second and third sessions lend themselves to using Zoom meetings. Grateful for panel comment. For a non-NFP. Don't know the context.
I would say that I wouldn't change formats. So if you're going to do the second 2 in Zoom, I would do all of them in Zoom, as opposed to making your attendees change where they're going. Is really, unless you've built up a web page for it and everything else, I would keep it all in one platform. You can decide what that platform is, but I wouldn't, if you know that Zoom is 2 and 3, I would stick to it. Next question.
Okay, moving on to Ernest Floyd of Bastrop, Louisiana. Has anyone observed the following behavior on iOS when a participant who is joined from the Zoom app takes an incoming phone call? The phone connects to Zoom and puts it on hold. What's the proper procedure to switch back to Zoom without hanging up the phone?
My procedure when I jump, I think the problem is for me is if I jump into Zoom, I try to turn the phone off and put it on Do Not Disturb. Like because I always know that any video app gets funky when it gets a phone call. So phone calls are kind of I tacitly still support phone calls. So, but only begrudgingly, because they just always screw up the state of the camera, of the phone. So I don't have a better solution for it though. I haven't seen it because, again, I turn it off pretty quickly. I don't let the phone do anything other than Zoom. But I could see how it looks like it. Yeah, everything's going to do something weird when you get a phone call. That's the problem. And so you just want to try to, if you're doing something with something that isn't the phone, you should do everything you can to turn the phone off. Next question.
Roberto Barrow of Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. We bought the Ubiquity network switch and it's working well. Thanks for your help. Any suggestions on how to set up a video studio, lighting, backdrop, and so forth? The room is approximately 8 by 8 by 9 foot high.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, that's almost a perfect cube, which is horrible for sound. So I would treat that room instantly, get baffles, so you change the dimensions of the room so you lessen the number of equal length of sides.
Good, Stuart.
In answering the question directly, I'd like to point out that there's this little thing on YouTube called Office Hours, and if you go back through and look for the Ruthless Reviews, we all show our gear, and you can probably pick up plenty of ideas from that on how to do things from budget level to Alex level.
The other thing that I would suggest is putting that in the second hour ideas. I think it's a great one. That's a whole second hour of studios, not our home setups that we're doing, but like how to build a studio. I think we should think about that as early as next week. I think it's a great subject. So make sure to put it in second hour. Know that I skim second hours, looking for what's doable for each week, and trying to figure out, who I can organize to put those things in. And so second hours are really important things to add things to. So we are at the top of the hour. I actually have a call time here that I'm now a minute late for. I am going to close it all off. Again, we made it. We made it to the end. There were a couple of times where I was like, I don't know if we have enough questions, but the attendees came through, and we were a little smaller group, but we moved through it quickly, and there were lots of good answers. And so I think it worked well. So great job to the panelists, great job to the attendees. And a reminder that next Monday, a week from today, we will have an evening session. So Stuart will be able to come in during his lunch break instead of the middle of the night. So anyway, so we're going to try it. We're going to see how it goes for everybody and see if there's enough people to make it sustainable. What we're trying to measure is like, do both of them do well on Monday is the real question there. So anyway, so we'll be experimenting with that, and we'll see how it works. Otherwise, I'll see many of you in just a second. I'll see you in a second. I'll get the post show started. And then for everybody else,
make you host, sir.
Oh, perfect.
You should be host now.
Great, perfect. And for everybody else, we'll see you tomorrow. So thanks, great work, and have a great day, evening, night, morning.